about environment management. And I think it's about time we get started. So, as I said, we're talking about environment management today. And Jay and Phil, could you explain why this is so important when implementing CPQ and why it can be so difficult as well?
Yeah, sure. I can start out. So when we talk about environment management or environment strategy, we're talking about the ideal way to follow a development life cycle, right? So you'll hear references to the software development life cycle a lot. And very generally, you want to have a development environment, a UAT slash break fix environment, and a production environment. Depending on the size of your org, you might add a couple other environments in there for staging bigger projects and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, that's the ideal way to handle this. And we are talking about this today with respect to both implementation best practices and DevOps tooling, because there are a lot of challenges to following that to the letter, right, Jay?
Yeah, and even beyond that, some of the tooling that exists is almost too rigid. Sometimes you need the ability to do things that, I'll put it this way, sometimes best practice is giving yourself some flexibility to do what you have to do to serve the business. That's the key as somebody was implementing CPQ or anything else. You have to be willing to be flexible to put your stakeholders, your customers, which are typically your users, right? That's what I'm talking about here, their needs in place. So how do you put together some sort of plan, some North Star, some ideal, right? Guiding light of what we should do, but also leave yourself the ability to do something you mentioned like that hot fix, that, you know what, something's broken. What do I do in this case? So the contingency plans that are around it, and just making sure you're building in those pieces into more of a traditional strategy, which is that, from lower to integration to a staging to UAT to pre-prod to production. The more sophisticated, the more mature you're going to get, typically the more levels, but it doesn't have to be that way. That's a piece I'm going to talk about a little bit more today. That don't think because you're well in your Salesforce path, with the organization that you're at, that you have to keep expanding your environment strategy and your pipeline there. It's not always the case. I think sometimes as admins, we go there right away. I'm more sophisticated, I better add about 3 more environments to this pipeline. That could be just another cause for mistake, another cause for headache, another set of eyes, more pieces, more collaboration. Some of the good things there, but also can add more time to releasing the items that you're working on.
We talk about adding more time, and that kind of brings you back to the last conversation we had,
Right.
which is just the inherent difficulties or the inherent challenges of moving CPQ data and metadata together, right? So just to kind of bring people current with this is our second webinar. We had one last week. We were talking about just how CPQ is unique. Getting less and less so, but is pretty unique in terms of its space on the Salesforce platform, in that actually most of its functionality is data driven rather than metadata driven.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why this is important, as we talked about, is because there are a lot of tools for moving metadata. Salesforce has one natively in change sets, right? But to kind of expand your DevOps strategy to include something more complex like CPQ that brings in this data as well as this metadata to work together to build a solution. And then to think about how that, if you don't have kind of a tool that does that, how much additional effort it is, given the complexities inherent in CPQ. If you've got 4 environments, you're deploying 4 different times, right? And how frequently should you do that? And so it kind of hurts your, as you were saying, Jay, kind of like your decision to scale up or down your environments, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned a change set in there, and even back at the early implementation of change sets, that even at that point, Salesforce was enforcing this idea of environment strategy. You have to connect environments to put in your change set pipeline, I guess, for lack of a better term. You have to build the outbound ones and the inbound ones. So it was putting together the framework for an environment strategy, maybe a little more free form, right? Not rigid pipeline stuff. but it was never put in place for anything data related. What we're really talking about here, I could go and data load. If I've got credentials to something, it doesn't care where the data is coming from. It's just sitting in a CSV file, right? It doesn't matter what pipeline I followed. If I'm doing best environment management strategy, there's a couple things inherently difficult with that. You mentioned the 4 environments, right, for rolling CPQ out. Well, you've got to you've got to build the work if you're doing it without some sort of DevOps tooling. You have to go and move all those pieces, typically individually by hand or some sort of data load process. You got to make sure that stuff works and then do that again. You're never gaining an economy of scale. So part of the environment strategy conversation is removing a roadblock that is otherwise just sunk time, and that's moving the same records multiple times. 4 environments, you're doing that same lift 4 times. 5, 6, you're not gaining anything. It's just 2 extra times, 2 extra hours, 2 extra hours, 3 extra hours, whatever it is for that release to happen in there. You start to put a process in place of your environments, and you're giving yourself the ability to focus on doing the work, removing the burden of that work and moving the work a little bit later. It also puts in place the idea of how do I best actually do my work? So we talked about CPQ and data last time, right? You mentioned recapped a bit. But environment strategy is also about where people should be doing the work when you kick off a project, too. So how do you give your admins and developers their own, I use this term quite a bit now, this kind of microclimate of production? How do you give them their own small version of what it's going to be released to effectively? Time consciously instead of going in and building a bunch of records by hand. So, we still hear prospects doing that. So that's the other side of this on my point of view, Phil.
I think that really hits on a good point, Jay, which is it's not really just about solving how do I move from dev to test to production. It's also how do I seed my dev environment with the data that I need in order to build and test my, maybe my 6 months, out sort of project efficiently. I actually have a client right now who's dealing with this very thing is, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of competing development initiatives. Everybody kind of wants their piece of their one full sandbox, right? Because it's got all the data. It's really easy to refresh. It's got the most useful data. The very process of kind of bringing that production rich, the data rich production data into a lower environment is really time consuming. Because of, again, kind of, you have to move really it's just the data at that point. So you need either somebody who's an expert at data loader, right? Who can bring in the necessary opportunities, quotes, et cetera. To give you the microclimate, right? The environment that they need to really be successful in there. And a lot of customers that I've implemented are just completely eschewing that process, and everybody's just kind of fighting for space in the one full sandbox.
And that's what we traditionally see. I come from Prodly, right? I put it in my own little avatar's name right here. I'm a Prodly guy. It's pretty obvious here that the 2 things we talk to most customers and prospect about are, well, how do I move my CPQ data, the 40 objects that are involved, data as metadata, for a better way to talk about it here. But also in general, how do I enable my team to go and do the work the way they should? And that is in their own environment that's representative of production. So I stop the toe stomping that happens in full. I actually let my full be refreshed. If you got everybody in there and they're all working on projects, that full sandbox goes 6 months, 9 months without ever being refreshed. That's too long. That is way beyond the stale. That's moldy bread. Should probably be pitched at this point. So that's the idea here. But when you open up a solution to do it with a DevOps tooling solution, a Prodly or some other ones possibly out there, you don't spend hours up front to kick off a project in one of those sandboxes, or a scratch org if somebody's using them, or whatever your mechanism is to do your development. We're not just talking about dev sandboxes here. Your environment strategy might include some scratch orgs. They're great for testing. They're maybe missing some things like some packages, but there's some solutions out there to help you install some missing packages in there. But that can be part of your environment strategy as well. basically being able to determine which sandbox is being used for which need. So your full sandbox, it's a great thing to test integrations. It is. There are certain integrations, call centers, your ERP platforms, your NetSuites, your SAPs, those kind of integrations in there. Financial Force, we want to talk about a monster package.
Mm-hmm.
They require things like a full sandbox in there. They're perfect for that. That's what they're used for. Your partial, you want a little bit less version, but you get random amount of records. What if that one random record that wasn't picked is a price rule that's setting pricing on your quotes? That's the issue with the partial sandbox. We can also fill that in as well. But we do talk a lot about kind of moving to the next one. This really leads into the idea of path to production. What's the ideal path, right? We're kind of floating around the subject of how do I get my developers, my admins, a place to do their work? Then how do I get that work back up? That really comes around this idea of, all right, I'm gonna use the pipeline word, the P word here, the pipeline word. I'm not talking about a specifically rigidly defined, it goes from here to here to here to here, although it could be that for you. I'm not saying that's wrong either, but what does your path to production look like? And Phil, you've been around, you've done a lot of, they've gone from zero, right? From nothing, new CPQ rollouts. It's not just that though, it's maintenance, it's ongoing. We talked a lot about this last time. So what have you seen work? And I know you laid out some of the common flow, but you talked about a 4 pipeline one. Kind of highlight that again. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that best piece.
Yeah. So I think what really works well, and I know we've got a question in the chat, and we'll get to
great.
What really works well is for me just kind of like a dev, a test, which is typically a full sandbox, and then production. The reason why it's really important to have that distinction, that delineation within environments, is that a lot of times you're doing things in dev that just are not going to see production anytime soon, right? So there's really no push to get that in the hands of users to test it.
Yep.
And then of course you also want to kind of keep we alluded to it a little bit, but keep the test environment as available for break fix environment. We never ever want to make changes in production directly, right? But we definitely we will definitely skip through the software development lifecycle if it means we've got a critical issue here.
Right.
We need to find the closest environment to production, get that implemented, tested, and moved quickly to production. And if you've got competing dev initiatives in that environment, you have no real confidence that what you're building and testing for a critical issue is gonna move into production, effectively, right?
And I think that highlights. No, go ahead, man. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. So yeah, I wanted to kind of like wrap that up, and then there's a question in the chat. Any challenges moving CPQ data with data loader that I think you should handle, Jay?
Well, yes, there are. Okay, the blanket answer to that question. There are challenges to moving, well, I'll actually back up. I think there's challenges to moving any type of data with data loader, to be honest with you. It's an exercise in your competency in VLOOKUPs and knowing order of operations. That's what it is. It's a mid-level Excel pro who also understands the order of operations that the objects have to go in. That's what it comes down to. Now, the challenges with CPQ are just exponentially more. So when you end up with, I throw around the 40 term, but it's probably closer to like 32, somewhere in there, objects that actually define configuration in CPQ, how things are functioning, your price rules, your bundles, your options, your constraints, your actions, all the good stuff that are in there, somewhere in the 35-ish range. If you're trying to data load that, you have to first know the records you want to move. You have to know the records that are related to that affect those records, because it's not one-off single instance records. It's the interrelatedness that is CPQ. You then have to know which way to import the data. So which object is actually first, second, third, fourth, 4/8, 5B, that's the common level where a bunch of stuff's on the same level. So which of those is first? Then there are inherent issues in CPQ where you actually need child data first. If you think about price conditions, your price actions, your price rules, Depending upon the type of rule that is, you may have to have your children in there before you can set the value where it's an any or an or an all. That's a child first requirement, but of course in Salesforce, you can't do that. So now you have to put in the parent record, the children, and then you have to go back and do an update on the parent record again. So can you do it? Ravi, I'm looking at your question right here. You can. The challenge is inherent to that is you take a DevOps tooling process that could do that in 25 minutes, all of those steps for you. The order of operations, everything that's a child, reparenting everything, doing the VLOOKUPs, putting the children in first if you need us to, programmatically. You take a 20-minute process you do with the technical aspects, and you make that into a 4-hour or an 8-hour day. I'm just throwing hours at it, Phil. You have much better idea of hours and something.
Well, I mean, the last time it was literally the difference between 8 hours and about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I would say that, you talked about the interrelatedness of CPQ objects in order to make things work. I think that when I hear data loader in relation to CPQ, I just think of it as just continuous trial and error, right?
Yeah.
There are so many different, even if you knew upfront absolutely everything that needed to be related, probably wouldn't be too terrible. But what a DevOps tool like probably will give you is this visualization, kind of like the schema builder in Salesforce. Gives you this visualization where you're kind of ahead of the curve, and you're seeing, okay, these objects are interrelated, and a lot of times probably will kind of remind you like, hey, don't forget about this thing. This is part of the lookup that makes the whole price rule work. Don't just move the price rule without the price action or nothing.
Yeah.
Like that, right?
So now that's good here, and it kind of brings us into, you start to highlight what best practices are. You start to highlight a pipeline strategy, right? An environment strategy in here. And it kind of brings us to the next piece we wanted to bring up today for the group. Here's a loaded question again. Well, so why is it difficult to follow the best practices here? And this is not a finger pointing exercise. This is not a judgment exercise. It is easiest to make your changes in production. That's true. I think everybody here knows the simplest path forward, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's the best, but the easiest path forward is just go and make a change in production. Unfortunately, you get a little finger crossing, let's see what happens kind of thing out of that. So why is it that it's hard to follow the best practices with your environment strategy here? I've got a couple of my own answers to that, and I can start first. Phil, maybe you've got your own.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay. Yeah,
okay.
I'll pipe in.
Personally, I think it's hard to follow a strategy like this because, at least on the onset, it looks like additional labor and additional time to roll things out. That's the number one issue. The second part that I find it would be hard to follow these best practices is you typically need to incorporate, and it's not a bad thing, but it can be difficult to follow. You need to incorporate additional people into the process, which is a good thing overall. But again, at the beginning, now it's the idea that I need more people stirring the pot, right? And that can be a hindrance. It can be a blocker to get things going. And when I mean more people, it's, okay, now I need to bring somebody in that might be, I'm not going to say release manager, maybe that's too overblown, but the idea of somebody who is tasked with not checking the work line by line or rule by rule, but making sure the items that are ready to move up the pipeline are expected. They're in this release. So some sort of lead architect or design lead, essentially there. Maybe a release manager, but maybe not that complicated either. Then you need the audit tracking, right? Then if you don't have a tool to do this, you need to keep track somewhere of what records moved, who moved them, what part of the sprint was it in, who did the work, who released the work. So now you've got a tracking piece to throw on top as part of best practice. So you've got a people, a inferred additional time commitment, and then maybe oh great, how do I track this stuff now, moving across my pipeline? So those are the three I see that would make it difficult to follow best practices.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, pressure from the business to get things fixed quickly, right? At a certain point, you can have things that seem life and death to the business, in the moment, but really should be going through the proper channels, because worse than maybe delaying half a day to make sure that you're unit testing and to make sure everything works,
Right.
is to push it too early and have something else break that you don't expect, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of what we do as an implementation firm is we kind of bring that, like we've felt how bad that pain can be if you don't do it the right way.
Yep.
And it can take some convincing from the customer, but if you have, if you've got kind of a solid background of, this is the way we do it and this is why.
Yeah.
And it's just that, waiting that extra day or whatever to make sure everything is right before moved into production, is way less costly than putting something into production that's not ready or that could break something else, right?
It pays dividends the first time something went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. And we get into the next steps here. A lot of this, as you were talking, Phil, I was kind of reading between the lines a little bit. There's a shift in pattern of behavior, right? There's a better way to do this, and yeah, we're gonna have to relearn it. People and processes have to change. Expectations have to shift a little bit. You may wait the day. The process may need to be revamped a little bit, but a lot of it's how do we get it right now? And then moving forward, it's just our process, right?
Mm-hmm.
People will be used to it. That's been the most difficult thing. And honestly, I've been at probably almost 2 years, almost exactly right now. And the re-education, the repatterning of people's behavior, we just do that with data loader. That's just how we do it. Or we just build records by hand. What if there was a better way? That question right there has been the heart of a lot of my conversations. There's a better way. Probably has a better way. There are other better ways out there too. We happen to have a very good, better way in the CPQ and the data space that's here. But that's been a thing. It's almost been an education that you don't have to do it the way you've been doing it. Mm-hmm. You don't have to still use change sets. You don't have to still use data loader that's in here. But it pushes us into, does environment management mean CI/CD, continuous improvement, continuous delivery, and or source control? Kind of the last little point that we've got today, kind of looking at our list. And we'll hang out much longer. Again, we'll happily take questions, whatever you want us to do. But I want to talk about, does environment strategy equate to CI/CD source control? It can. All right, I'm a sales engineer. I'm going to give you the yes and the no to almost every question you ever ask me. That's just what we do, because there's always a way to maybe get around a hard yes. So in this case, it can, but it doesn't have to be. It's not a one-to-one kind of direct path between the two. If you want to follow a rigid CI/CD pipeline and you want to go down that path, then absolutely. Part of that CI/CD process will be your environment management strategy. How do I spin up environments to work in? How do I assign them? And how do I get the data in there to go into a project and test earlier? That will be a piece of that. Does that have to be source control? No. Can it be? Sure. If you want to go down that path and get all the good things from source control, a backup, a rollback, a code review, an approval process, a paper trail, all the good things you get from source control, that's fine too. But environment strategy doesn't have to be that complex out of the gate. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my thought on it. And the CI/CD thing, I'm in that space. We've all seen it now. But I don't know. What's your opinion on that final question, kind of looking at our...
Yeah, so I try to think about it from the perspective of, like, are there certain verticals that kind of lean more towards CI/CD sort of thing? And I think of kind of like the healthcare life sciences vertical, where there tends to be a lot of customization on top of what you're buying from Salesforce. Yep. To me, CI/CD or source control really is about kind of maintaining development paths. And what CPQ is trying to do, inherently, right, is to remove the need for those development paths. So when I think of environment management with CPQ, CI doesn't come up immediately because mainly I'm concerned about moving data, moving metadata, moving them all at once and validating them against each other. Right. When I, just, looking at a bit bucket or something like that, I definitely get the usefulness. But I think that I don't see it a lot used in conjunction with CPQ. To me, they're pretty different.
Yeah, no, and that's right. And it's always nice to hear you're in the trenches more than I am. It probably has a perspective on this that here's how we can talk. If you're talking about going to source control for your metadata, great. I get it. There's a host of reasons why you should do that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do that, you should do the same thing for your CPQ config data. It is just as critical to the success of your business as your metadata is. Probably has a solution to leverage your repos for your CPQ config data. It gives you that rollback, that redeploy, all of the things you get out of source control based development. And because CPQ is essentially developed the majority of it primarily, there's metadata involved as well. We talked about that. But the majority of it comes down to the rules and the records you're creating. The record data, you should be doing the same thing for your CPQ data as you're doing for metadata and sticking that in your source control to get those benefits here. Mm-hmm. We've got a solution that is probably under adapted. And Phil, it's funny you talked about it. You probably have the mindset that most of our customers and prospects do too, is you know what? I really don't see it there. We've started to take a different approach and say, hey, you're doing it for metadata. Your CPQ record is metadata. You just don't see it that way. You should be doing the same thing for your source control and your CPQ data that's in there.
I'll just say I'm hearing more and more customers bringing that, this desire for greater source control and, moving towards CI. And like, there isn't really like a solution there that, I should say, I would love to be able to recommend them a solution that would manage that for them and manage all the data and metadata deployment for them all in one place.
It's funny you talk about that. Again, I'm wearing my proudly colored glasses and my proudly hat right now. Our solution to that has been Salesforce's DevOps Center, right? It is source control driven metadata deployments that Salesforce is giving you, plus proudly source control deployments for CPQ data. Now you've got everything in Git. You have it in your pipelines, in your source control. You're getting all the benefit of all the good things that it does with org tracking and change management, release management pieces. You're getting all the benefits from source control for both metadata and data with a Proudly Plus DevOps Center type solution. So I may have to go self-fill a little bit on that vision. It sounds like, but I will happily do so. But I'll throw a little bit of that in. This is as salesy as I'll get today, and it's going to be directed at Phil. So
looking forward to it.
All right.
Yeah.
That's kind of it today. I'm going to recap. I'm going to distill. Again, that's what I do. I kind of lowest common denominator. Environment strategy is about how do I define my path to production, whatever that means, Phil. You talked about a good one there that you've seen work a lot. Mm-hmm. Which environments should be used for those, and which environments in there should be used for specific functions and not for other functions. That's key. This box is meant for this. This is what I'm going to do with it, and sticking to that. And then being able to leverage those lower environments that are a part of that. How do we do that? Well, that's by being able to get my data into there, not taking 4 hours every sandbox. Proudly solution, I can seed all of your CPQ data up to 5 dev sandboxes. In an hour, they'll run in parallel. You're up and running and good to go. Mm-hmm. That's the ability there. And then when you've done the work and built your new bundles and price rules, how do you release those back up the chain? Again, not doing that by hand, finding a solution that gives you your audit trail, that gives you your who did what, where, when, link it to Jira tickets or your Azure work management ticket, the why of somebody did a release. So when compliance come knocking on your door at the end of the year, you give them a quick one sheet. Here's why we did this. Here's who did it. Here's who made the changes. Here's who released it. And you can get them off your back as quickly as possible too. So there you go. All right, there's that was like a two floor little pitch about environment strategy and why it matters. Most important though, and Phil, you talked about this, setting up a strategy early and then adhering to that.
Yeah.
It's going to pay dividends down the road. So.
Yeah. Experience that pain up front so that you don't have to experience it later and continuously thereafter, right?
A week up front is better than the every time something goes wrong, a day or two down. Mm-hmm. It's going to pay a lot at the end. So, I don't know, kind of final thoughts on my side here. Again, thanks to the group, thanks to Phil. Anything else, Phil, maybe that I missed in my overview there?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it pretty well. And we have some questions come in. Love to
please
keep talking about this.
Awesome. Thank you again, Phil. Thank you, Jay, for the last 30 minutes. As Jay said, we'll be hanging out here for a little bit. Any questions, feel free to raise your hands or drop them in the chat. And Phil and Jay will be happy to answer anything.
I'll be sitting here, kind of walking around, happy to take them. And if you feel so inclined, I think they can unmute themselves. Is that true, Shannon? Did we open that up too? Can't remember.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Participants have that ability, but really just raise your hand and I'll be able to
Click them off. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. You'll be able to unmute yourself and talk to anybody in close proximity. If you want to take the floor, raise your hand.
Yeah, perfect.
With some resources that I think you'll find very helpful.
I didn't hear her question, Shannon. What did I do wrong?
No, this is on me.
Okay.
Pretty late today. I'm wondering, everybody got their environment strategy all mapped out already? If so, good work.
Yeah.
Maybe it was so much knowledge that we dropped that I got to absorb it all.
Or maybe they're saving it up for our next meeting, which I'm particularly excited about.
Yeah, the post go live plan.
Yeah.
This is the always the afterthought. Cool, here we go. We've given you CPQ. Good luck, right? That's the
I think our environment management conversation really starts to hit home after you go live, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's when you have, right? There's not really a need for a fixed environment when you're in implementation, right?
Right. You're still pushing everything up, and then you start to talk about, okay, what happens now? That's a good point. Yeah, looking ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good question, guys. Ajit, I saw you raise your hand. If you have any questions or any comments, please let us know.
I don't see you in the room, Ajit, to step up and give you the microphone. Where are you?
He had emailed us as well. He was trying to get in this room. He's in the lobby, or they're in the lobby, but they're away from their. I was trying to get a hold of them, and looks like they're away offline.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely open to that. So just like a demo of CPQ capabilities to start with, Ravi.
We did record the session, Bill.
Oh, I didn't know how to play this game or how to maneuver this thing.
It's quite all right. It's part of the fun. But certainly we'll record the session. I don't know if, I'm sorry if I'm stepping in on anyone's toes here, just walking into the room. That was kind of rude of us. Jay, team, I know we're going to be holding another session next week. Have we talked about that at all?
Yeah, we previewed that just a little bit, and Ravi had a question about what we could potentially show in one of these next two sessions.
Mhm.
So I wanted to nail down a little bit with you, Ravi. What did you have anything specific you were looking for? Did you want to see Prodly, CPQ, both? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Got it. So we could, that actually could be really cool, Jay. We could kind of pull back the covers on maybe
Yeah.
just like an already created price pool or something, show how the objects kind of interweave, and then we could hand it over, we could kind of bring it over to you maybe to show on the Prodly side.
And even the end user experience. All right, here's this price rule. Cool. What does it do? And then show actually somebody building. Cool. Why does this matter? How does it affect my users
Okay.
that are in there? So yeah, Robbie, that's a really. We've kind of stayed away from the screen share, the whiteboarding kind of thing here, but I think it would provide some context to an audience like yourself in the group. So, all right. I mean, we are always looking for good talent if you want to talk about it. And I head up a solutions engineering team here. The more people that are familiar with CPQ, familiar with the pains of managing and deploying that thing, the better off I would be to kind of look at somebody here. But yeah, always in the market for the right people at the right time. That is never something I will close the door on.
Sure, because I was taking a look at LinkedIn Prodly website. There are no like CPQ related job opportunities over there.
Yeah,
but there are some others. Yeah.
There are some other jobs. Yeah, we don't typically go right for one specific audience. Our solution works well in CPQ, but it is also agnostic. So it doesn't have to be CPQ specific. It happens to be that that's where we were born from, it's where we were created from. But internally here, we've got a couple admins who do some work with it, but it is not a prerequisite for Prodly to understand CPQ here.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, so in order to get job, like where exactly I can apply for if I want to be hired at Prodly?
Yeah, I think it's on our. Wow, you're talking about a question I don't know, but I will find that and I will send it through you in the chat.
So, sure, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks much.
So Jason, you mentioned that there's a recording available. How does that one get to? Does it get emailed, the webinar link? And do you have previous recordings too?
Yeah, the recording of this session will be emailed to everybody that has registered for this course tomorrow.
Okay.
So be receiving this one. Unfortunately, our last one's recording did not record. We had some connectivity issues with a recording platform, but we made triple sure that this one is going to be recorded.
Okay. Also, I had a question. If anyone has any knowledge of that, is like I'm taking. We are like midway implemented CPQ, and we're doing another phase on that. So I'm just onboarding on our project, and we're doing some peripheral work and customization along with. So I'm actually registered to take my CPQ specialist exam very recently. I have some velocity experience, some steep brick evaluation pre acquisition. So you have any links or any good resources where to go to, like some practice or like some tutorials or things?
Yeah, I actually put something like this together for the last group. So have you explored the trails on the CPQ related trails on Trailhead, Ajit?
I'm working through that, some of it, not much, but yeah, I have the link for the official link to the trail mix actually.
Okay, so there's a few trail mixes, and there's kind of like more of the user centric and versus the admin centric, and there's also a really cool just exam prep trail mix that you're probably referring to. So yeah, after this meeting, once I get your I can send you the list that I put together for people that I recommend before they take the test.
Okay, awesome. I mean, till now, even till the architect level, I've been using Focus on Force actually a lot. So,
oh yeah, I love that resource. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have because they have a good practice session for timed exams and stuff like that. They are missing the CPQ module.
I know. I even found. I think I found a good resource on. Oh my gosh, what's that? That app that's kind of like digital flashcards. What's it called? But somebody put together just like a public.
Oh, nice.
Flashcards of like 100 CPQ questions.
Oh, wow.
Can't remember the name of the app right now. Shoot. Yeah. If I think of it, I'll include that in my email to you.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Mm-hmm. No problem. So you said you're about halfway through an implementation?
They've done, I just onboarded on my client. So there's about a year around of work and implementation starting this week.
Okay.
But there's much more enhancements and new phases to go into that. Or they're rolling it out. So a subset of market segments are covered in that. Now they're rolling it out to the rest of the segments.
Oh yeah, that's when it gets exciting. Cool.
Yeah. Or more product lines.
Mm-hmm.
And more integrations and, So there's still a lot of it is on Oracle. Sorry, they're using that also by the side. Excuse me.
So they're migrating from what Oracle configurator to CPQ?
No, I think they're using Oracle CPQ also in parallel for sales.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they'll be bringing that in. So there's a lot of data, in the manual batch or things like that we're getting from Oracle right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a data cleansing effort also going on, but CPQ is there. It's been I think a couple of project cycles back, I was way deep into CLM and CPQ. So now coming back into it, and it'll start picking up as soon as I'm fully entrenched in it.
Sure. I got my CPQ career started at Big Machines, actually. Yeah. So I'm very familiar with Oracle CPQ.
Oh, okay.
Do you guys also do SAP CPQ or?
My firm does not. We are Salesforce CPQ, billing, and Conga Suite right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We are quote to cash specifically. So kind of like working within the Salesforce world, how quote to cash is defined, from opportunity to invoice, essentially we'll cover.
Have you worked with any complex manufacturing organization, and what's your experience with CPQ implementing for those manufacturing organizations?
Yeah,
like product models are very complex, right?
Yep. So that's where I got my so starting at Big Machines, that was kind of what it was built for. It was built to handle super complex assemblies of machines, right? So the purpose was to kind of build in all of the logic and the constraints and all of that goes into making sure that a machine is built properly. to kind of take that out of engineers' heads and put it into a tool, right? It's really challenging to bring in that whole rule set into CPQ for the purpose of like manufacturing a really complex part, because partly because what we discussed before, because it's all data driven, right? So it's really there's actually a tool that was kind of built by the people of Big Machines that helps a little bit, called logic.io, that will actually kind of bring in that rule set in a different way so that it's more user friendly. Because in CPQ, it's kind of hard to see as you start to select options which ones don't go together until you hit an update. This one updates in real time and makes sure that as you're clicking through and building a turbine engine, that it's kind of correcting you as you're going, rather than kind of expecting you to know it up front and then running the rule set, if that makes sense. It is still really, really good at the pricing aspect of it, and I've implemented it a lot for like kind of channel partner situations where you might have an internal sales rep who's selling the tool, and then you can also make it externally available to a channel partner to use their same quoting setup. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
industrial manufacturing covers a lot of things. So can you kind of tell me what the use case would be?
Yeah, so I work for this manufacturing company where we implemented Oracle Big Machines, and the product family and all the configurations are very complex. They would sell things like compressors and air conditioners and things like that, which the model was very hard to build within CPQ, and it was very expensive. So what we decided is we invoked the configurator from the ERP into Big Machines.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, so I'm like, does Salesforce CPQ, does it have the ability to do that? Even the pricing rules, for example, would you be able to invoke it from an ERP instead of reconfiguring everything, which was a huge undertaking?
No, it's a good question. So I think more product rules could leverage an external integration to an ERP, but your rule set would really have to be built there and be pulled in real time, and run by CPQ. I wouldn't store your rule set in CPQ because of some of the user experience limitations I mentioned. But if the rule set lived externally, you can call that via a product rule API.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I learned about how Proudly supports CI and source control. Pretty cool.
So
yeah,
little pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, guys. Thank you for everybody that stuck around and asked great questions. We'll be back next week with our post-go live plan and a little look under the hood of CPQ. So we'll see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Yeah, echoing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shannon. And if you can send that recording email, that'll be awesome.
Definitely.
Will do. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Ajit. Appreciate your.
Absolutely.